Thanks for joining those of you who just came in. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us for Bible study. You can open your Bibles up to the book of 2 Kings in the Old Testament. So we're going to be in a minute. But as you're turning there, I was going to ask you guys, and I think everybody should be able to contribute to this, but can you guys share a little bit about a time in your life where you faced a radical change of plans, like your plans like totally catastrophically fell through? So maybe the question is really, what did coronavirus interrupt for you? But share a little bit about these. We're talking about disappointment today, so just all that by way of preference. We're talking about these things that we have to deal with. Letter D, disappointment's a big one we all as human beings experience. But give me something that you had to change your plan significantly on, and how that impacted you.
Well, I can go.
Go ahead.
It's funny that we're doing this today because I just got my cap and gown dropped off this morning. So that's definitely a thing. But additionally to that, like even in the fall, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. So it's like, I don't know, but that's definitely been disappointing, but also has the potential to be better than it was supposed to be. So
Yeah, well, so you're getting at some of the perspective that we're going to want to walk away from today with. But there's the potential for our change of plans to, we thought we had something really great in mind, something we always anticipated being there, and for whatever reason something happens, we're disappointed, but there's another outcome from that we might not have anticipated or expected. So yeah, anybody who's with Ellie in graduation, I'm looking at you, Ethan, is definitely facing some changes of plans there. And Sarah, I can't see if Sarah's there with you, Em, but no, okay. All right. Other ways that we've had to change plans or face some kind of catastrophic plan failure, something of that nature. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I'm sure you already know this because, your mother is the librarian, but we can't get books, and that is sad.
That is sad.
You
don't own any books, Sarah? Didn't I ask you this already?
Yes, you did. But I really like going to the library, and I went every week, and now that's gone.
Yeah.
So.
No, when a major part of your routine gets taken away, something that you take as a sort of for granted, I get to get a new book, or just see people that I like to have conversations with, or get out of my house, right? That can come with a lot of disappointment when all of a sudden the opportunity to do that is no longer there. All right, I'm disappointed the libraries are closed too, although I feel like a hypocrite saying that because I can't remember the last time I set foot in a library that wasn't in my house, but. My mom is very disappointed that the libraries are closed too. Anybody else? Big change of plans? Or something going not the way you expected it to?
Well, this has nothing to do with coronavirus, but last year when we were on vacation in Africa, we were touring all day, and it wasn't really like where I wanted to be going. It was like our very first day, and I was super bored. Well, I was pretty bored. But at the end of the day, my uncle who planned the trip said that he would take us to a beach and we could go paddle boarding for a couple hours. So the whole day, that's all I was looking forward to. And then we got to the beach and it was closed because there was a shark attack, and there was like 15 sharks in the water swarming. So it was the part of my day that I was most looking forward to, and then we couldn't go.
Right. And so that, Emma, that's especially disappointing because the thing you were enduring, right, to get to the thing you wanted to do. Oh man, that's awful.
I didn't even have to endure it, and then I did, but
right.
It's only 15 sharks.
Yeah.
If there were 16, that's my limit. 16 isn't bad. But 15, sure is.
Just go for it.
We all know how the movie Jaws ends, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, some people live, there's just one shark there. No, I can totally imagine how disappointing that was. Yeah, especially when you're, like I said, when you're waiting for something, enduring something in the meantime to get somewhere, that's really frustrating. So I'll give you guys a story. This, I don't know if this necessarily fits like total plan failure, but the first year that Tara and I were married, I decided to throw a surprise party for her birthday. And at that point, we were living in an apartment over in West Deptford, and I like got like 40, 50 people into our apartment like while we were at church. So like they all left early. I was like kind of delaying stuff and like setting up the surprise party for Tara. And I forget how I had timed it all out, but I was like, well, the plan was I would take her somewhere to get lunch, and then we would come back there and everybody would be there when we got back. And so we ate lunch somewhere at like the mall or something. And Tara was like, oh, while we're here, can we go? I need a new pair of boots. So let's go grab a new pair of boots while we're here. And at least that's what I'm hearing in my, 1 year married brain. I'm like, a pair of boots, how long could that take, right? And so ladies are smiling, right? Because getting a new pair of boots means visiting every possible boot store in the mall, right? And I can't sort of drag her away because it's like her birthday. We're doing lunch together, and meanwhile, there's like 50 people in our 1-room apartment, like sweating, waiting for us to get there. And so they're texting me and they're like, where are you? Like, is this a practical joke? And no, so finally we get back there, and then Tara's like embarrassed because we took all this time boot shopping, and there's all these people waiting for her for her birthday. So that had the potential to be a catastrophic plan failure.
Everyone just goes home.
But everybody loved Tara so much that they sweated it out in our apartment waiting for us to get there, and then they all left because it was hot in there. Yeah. But anyway, so we lay plans, right? And I've since learned how to be a better surprise party thrower since year 1 of marriage, but. There's all kinds of things that we look forward to, all kinds of things that we take as a given that that's going to be what happens. And again, you seniors probably in particular there, you just assume that when that cap and gown comes, right, like it's time to graduate, like there's nothing that's going to stop that ceremony. It's inevitable that it's going to happen. And now we're in a position that nobody in our world really could have foreseen would be the position of 2020. So we're going to talk about disappointment today. And I think that with all these types of things, what we need to be aware of is that, we have a tendency as human beings to cultivate this sense of expectation and entitlement. And I don't mean to step on too many toes right here up in the bat, but, like all the plans that we lay out, Michael, I feel like, in a sense, we just assume that our plans are going to lay out, they're going to work, and when they don't, a lot of times the level of disappointment that we feel is directly proportional to how much we invested in that plan or how much we expected that plan to be fulfilled. And so my caution to us, and what I hope we take away from today, is that as Christians, when we look to sort of other people, things for the future, the plans that we have for ourselves as things that are going to satisfy us, we start to lose sight of the gospel. We start to lose sight of what it is that, well, first of all, who God is, the one who's actually sovereign over these things. And we lose sight of the good news that is all of our plans, all of our wants, all of our desires are best fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. All right. So that's not to say that our disappointment is, oh, forget about it, it's no big deal, right? Those are things we have to wrestle with. And I certainly think that God is not saying, oh, just care about me and then all your problems are going to go away. No, God actually is working with us through those things and shaping us and growing us. So let's take a look at an example of somebody who experienced some disappointment in 2 Kings chapter 5. And we're going to look at another one of those sort of familiar Bible coloring stories. All right. So when you were in VBS or Sunday school, you probably did a coloring picture of Naaman the Syrian who was cured of his leprosy. All right. Well, let's take a closer look at the story and take a look at some of the factors of disappointment and sort of the different players in the story and kind of see how their roles interact with one another. So 2 Kings chapter 5, we're going to read the first 7 verses and then we'll pause and we'll take some inventory. So verse 1 says, Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. Okay, so right off the bat, we see that he's a privileged guy. He's got lots of respect and social standing because he's the commander of the army, and his armies have been victorious in the battles that Syria has been fighting. It says he was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. Okay, now the Syrians on one of their raids had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his lord, thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. All right, that's like a small fortune. I can't exactly compute that into US dollars without doing some complex algorithms, but lots and lots of money being brought here as a present, okay? And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, verse 6, which read, when this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy. And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me. Let's pause there and kind of take some inventory, all right? So again, we've got Naaman the Syrian, we've got the servant girl, and then we've also got the king of Israel. This is sort of the three major players in the text to this point. So what do you guys make of Naaman? What do we learn about him? What kind of a personality do you get just from those few verses that talk about him thus far? Who is he?
I would say he's very respected because like even his servant wanted to help him, and a lot of times, especially I think then, like servants aren't always treated well.
Yeah, so he's definitely got a lot of respect, and at least respect from the servant, right? If not more. Okay, what else? What else would you say about Naaman? There's some other important character qualities and factors about him here. How high up in the chain of command is he? Go ahead, Sarah.
I think you said he was a commander.
Yeah, so he's a commander of the armies of Syria, which means he's not the top dog, but he's pretty high up there, right? He answers to the king of Syria. All right, so he's got a lot of prestige, which means not only does he have respect from his servant, he also has respect from his soldiers, right? They've achieved victory. It says that, well, actually, it's giving credit to the Lord. By him, the Lord had given victory to Syria, which, by the way, very interesting and important detail here. This is an enemy of Israel, right? Syria is an enemy of Israel, okay? And it's actually saying in this text that the Lord had given them the victory, okay? And the servant girl is an Israelite, which means that they've had victory over Israel, okay? Which we're, by the way, in a time period where Israel is doing a lot of sinful rebellion, and the Lord is using these outside nations like Syria to discipline them, right? To judge them for their wrongdoing, okay? So he's high up. He's wealthy, right? He's a successful commander, but he has a problem, and what is it? It's right there in verse 1.
He has leprosy.
He has leprosy, okay? What's leprosy?
I have a question.
I'm sorry?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead. Having a hard time hearing you, Alex. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Like what? Wouldn't he have to be like isolated if he had leprosy?
So that's a great question. If he were a Hebrew, he would have been, because the Hebrew law from like Moses's law would have said you have to be outside the community, you can't have contact. I don't know what Syrian laws would have been like regarding him, but also it's important to keep in mind when we think about what leprosy is. This is a word that kind of catches a lot of different types of skin diseases. It's sort of like a general term. It's not specific to any one type. So whatever version of the disease he had, it could have been that it wasn't as serious as the kind that would cause you to be cast out of your community. We don't really know, but whatever the case is, maybe because he's such a good soldier, he's earned some of the privileges of still being connected to, his family and society. So that's a great question, Ellie. I actually don't know the full answer to it. But other than this is a different nation who are not under the law of Moses, and so their rules for how they were going to conduct themselves when it came to leprosy would have been different. All right. I may have answered my question there. Leprosy is a skin disease, right? It's ugly in the most extreme cases where if you ever Google leprosy, and I wouldn't recommend you do it because it's kind of horrifying. People like lose fingers and pieces of their body, their extremities, essentially the skin just deteriorates. It kind of eats itself. And it's very, it's very, because it's a deforming kind of disease. It like sort of naturally causes people to want to disassociate from you. So it's not a very pleasant thing. And if it is one of those extreme cases, it's something that could eventually claim his life. So he's in this position, and I love the way the text sets this up where he's a man of valor. He's a leader. He's got soldiers. He's got prestige. He's got a servant, but he's got a problem, right? And this sort of like the way this is all set up is no matter how well off he was financially, successfully in his career, right? He still couldn't fix that one thing, this underlying issue of his leprosy. So that's his physical problem. But I think, what's hinted at here is that if he's going to go seek out the prophet of Israel, this guy who's in Samaria, by the way, he thinks it's the king. It's not the king of Israel. It's this other guy whose name is Elisha. But the fact that he's sent to seek out a man of God also indicates that there's something spiritual that he needs as well, right? And especially coming from an outside nation in the Old Testament, this is a guy who's a pagan worshiper. He's not someone who's following the true God. And so he needs something spiritually. And the leprosy is just indicating that there's a problem, right? That goes pretty deep. It's not just a skin problem, right? And so it's important that we see that, the Lord is giving Naaman his victories, even though he's courageous and great and all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, the Lord is the one who's been giving him success. Ironically, his name, Naaman, actually means pleasantness. Which is kind of, I just find kind of ironic that he finds himself in this situation, yet that's kind of his name there. I think the Bible has those small humorous moments there. But anyway, what do you guys make of the servant girl? What's important about her beyond just the role that she plays in the narrative? What do you guys think about her? What her brief little line of dialogue here say about her character? And Ellie just left, so somebody else has to answer. Sarah, you also have answered quite a bit. I want to get somebody else here in the conversation. What else do you guys make of the servant girl? Anybody? Let's look back at what she says. So this is verse 3. Well, let's get her story in verse 2. Now the Syrians on one of their raids had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. So she's not directly a servant to Naaman himself. She serves his wife in the household, right? But she says to her mistress in verse 3, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." What does that say about her? What is she saying? What does it say about her character?
She trusts that she has faith that he can heal him.
Yeah, so there's this prophet who's in Samaria that she knows if only Naaman will go and see him, like he just work a miracle, something miraculous is going to happen. And that big prophet. By the way, Lucas, you all right there? Lucas fell down a flight of stairs. He's gone. Okay.
What?
We're getting some noise from you there, buddy. I was making sure you were okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Just making sure you're okay.
All right.
What do you think about the servant girl? Why I have you on the line?
Well, I mean, it kind of sounded like she was like putting her trust in like man's power rather than God's, kind of. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to observe the way that she talks about this. So she says she's sort of talking about the prophet versus if he only believed in God, then things would be better, right? She doesn't say that.
Oh, okay.
But But I'm agreeing with you. I think that in a sense, when you read that, it could sound like she's saying there's this guy. He's this great guy. He's powerful. He works magic or something like that, right? And would be able to cure him. But I think when when the Bible in the Old Testament puts these figures like Elisha or Elijah, David on the throne, there's these certain figures that, especially David and Elisha are two key ones that really represent the Christ figure in the story. Somebody who's going to come and do these miraculous works, who's going to heal souls, as well as bodies, and do it in this humble way. So when she is talking about having sort of a faith in the prophet, I mean, she's having faith, at least indirectly, in the God of Israel. God of Israel is the one who's empowering this prophet to do the things that he does. So you're right to observe the language there, Lucas, but I think her faith is not in Elisha. It's in the God who's behind Elisha. Is the way we want to understand that. But what do you guys think is remarkable about how she speaks about Naaman? Remember, he's like her owner. You're pointing at me. At least in the place. Now you're pointing at Ellie, but Ellie can't answer any more questions. She's used up her answers for now. Now you're pointing at the ceiling.
No one's up there.
No one's up there. That's Noah. Noah, you have any thoughts? Sarah's elected you. Noah may have left.
I'm still here.
Oh, he's there.
I zoned out. I apologize.
That's all right. So the question is, the way that the servant girl speaks about Naaman, her master, seems a little surprising to me. I don't know if it seems that way to you guys, but I mean, what does it say about how she thinks and feels about Naaman that she speaks to him in the way that she does? Or speaks to her mistress on behalf of him?
I don't know. I'm put on the spot. I don't know.
That's right. You can yell at Sarah for that. Let me put it to
Really?
you. Yeah, she pointed at you. Let me put it
Wow.
in any movie, okay, or any story where there's a master and a slave kind of relationship, all right? How typically do the slaves feel about their master?
It feels as if they're being, I guess, treated in a way that they have no choice but to do what they are asked of doing.
Right? They're not free, okay? So how do you think that would make them feel about their master? This is for anybody. It doesn't have to just be Noah.
Probably best friends, right?
They're probably best buddies, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're going over to each other's houses for dinner, right? I don't know. That's probably not possible because the slave doesn't own a house,
Oh.
right?
He
All right.
probably like hates him inside, but he can't show that in any way, or else he'll probably get beat or something.
Yeah, Lucas, you're right. There's probably a lot of anger, a lot of, I feel crushed as a human being because I'm not free. That's sort of where you would expect a person to be there. But listen to how she says this again. Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy, right? Typically in these kinds of scenarios in movies that depict slavery, even thinking back to historical events in the United States, right? Slaves are not fond of their masters because their masters they own them, right? That's the virtue, or not the virtue, the inherent quality of slavery is that it's dehumanizing, right? One person is owned by another person. And yet the way she speaks is, I would is sort of an old fashioned way of saying, I wish that my Lord were with the prophet so that he could be healed, right? Now, what this tells me is, one, that either Naaman is actually a pretty generous, kind master, which is a possibility. And I think there's some evidence in the text that would suggest he is a nice master. He's at least kind to his servants. But also it says something about the servant girl's heart, right? That instead of hating the person who's taken her into slavery, she actually has a heart of compassion for him and wishes that he were able to be healed. And I think that says a lot about her,
Like even if he was a nice guy, he still took her from her
Yeah.
home, from her parents.
She's still a slave, right?
and she still is wanting to care for him.
Yeah. And so, there's this contrast, and the text is setting this up. And I think it's a little subtle, but, from Naaman, this masterful, powerful guy who has this huge underlying problem that he can't fix, there's a little servant girl, right? Humble, not even named in the text, right? She's anonymous in a sense, enslaved, right? Captive. She has no standing whatsoever. She's purely, at the whim and will of her master. And yet she shares this knowledge that her master needs, the most, because power isn't going to save him. However, the good news that she offered has the potential to bring about the kind of salvation that he needs, right? So that's a big deal, right? Despite her captivity, she's not bitter, okay? Imagine the types of disappointment she might feel, okay? Naaman's disappointed for one level, but man, she's got to be disappointed too, because she's taken away from her home, right? She's in a totally new context, and trying to maybe earn the favor of her master in this, lost, probably scared in a lot of ways. And yet here she is maintaining a spirit of, she trusts in the Lord. And so this is the place from which her confidence is going to come, not from the circumstances that she's experiencing. By the way, this is a running theme in the Bible. It's always the underprivileged, the humble, the donkey that communicates truth in the Bible. I guess remember the story of Balaam's donkey, right? It like rescues him from, going headlong into the angel of death, Old Testament story. Anyway, it's always these voices that otherwise would have been voiceless that God uses to communicate his truth. Children, right? Jesus says it's out of the mouths of babes and infants that praise comes, speaking to the fact that the Pharisees, who were so religious and so wise, right, couldn't see the Messiah in front of their face, and yet out of the mouths of children who were, by all means, like naive and impressionable, right? They saw truth for what it was. And the same thing is here, this little girl who's able to see truth and communicate that truth, okay? And so even though she's not named, by the way, like she's like on par with like Daniel and, these other prophets like Ezekiel that were like in slavery, in a foreign country, but stood up and did this great work for the Lord and for their people. I mean, she's right up there with them because she's demonstrating the same type of faith and the same type of humility. All right. So, I mean, some of the things that she might have, she believed about God to be true, that all things happen for a reason, right? She probably had some concept of God being in control over this, that he's merciful, that even this Syrian general or commander who's, an enemy of the people of Israel could find mercy from God and be healed. That's something she had to believe. She has a sense of kindness and compassion for others, and that she has this knowledge that the true God must be shared with other people. These are all things that she must have had at least some semblance of understanding in order to put herself in a position where she could suggest something to her master, and not be beaten for it, right? Or not be, put in a position where she's going to be sold or something like that. All right. So anyway, that's where she is. That's where he is. We have this contrast between the powerful and the weak, and the weak is going to help the strong here. Okay. So the Naaman goes to the king of Israel. He probably thinks the king of Israel is this guy who's going to do the work, but the king is terrified, right? He's like tearing his clothes, which in the Old Testament is a sign of great remorse or grieving. So he basically thinks, this is a trick. The king of Syria is setting a trap up for us. I'm going to be, assassinated or something. All these kinds of thoughts might be going through his head. This, by the way, is the king of Israel, probably Jehoram, who we see in other stories here, who is not a good king. All the kings in the northern tribe of Israel are wicked at this point. So not a good guy, right? But here's what happens. So verse 8, when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king saying, "Why have you torn your clothes?" That expression just sounds kind of funny to me in our kind of scenario. But again, it's this expression of great remorse, grieving, fear. The Lord is going to judge me kind of expression. Okay. So, when he's talking about tearing his clothes, he's not just like worried that he needs a tailor or something, right? It's like, this is a big deal. Okay.
That's your best shirt.
That's my best shirt. All right. It says, "Let him come now to me that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman was angry and went away, saying, "Behold, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper? Are not Abana and Parphar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. But his servants, okay, here's the servants again, not the same servant, but other servants, came near and said to him, "My father, it is a great word that the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? He has actually said to you, wash and be clean." Has he actually said to you, excuse me, wash and be clean? So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. All right. Interesting. We get a parallel here again to being like a little child, right? Being humble, being, young and able to believe, right? Is kind of the analogy that's given there, right? But here's what happens. So they get to the door of Elisha's house. Okay. He's traveled all this way, and Elisha doesn't even come out to talk to him. Right? Elisha sends a messenger outside. Okay, maybe he was afraid of coronavirus. All right. He sent the messenger outside to go talk to the delegation from Syria, right? And give these instructions. Okay. And Naaman is furious. He's like, "I've come all this way. Aren't there nicer, less polluted rivers back in Syria that I could take a bath in? Right? How is this even a thing?" Okay. And then the servants, they speak to him and they sort of talk him off the ledge. And they're like, "Dude, he gave you this command. It's simple. Why not try it? What's the harm in trying this? And you came all this way, so why not?" And he does it, and he's healed. All right. What do you guys think about Elisha's approach to handling Naaman? What do you guys think the message might be that Elisha is trying to communicate to him? Any thoughts on that?
Maybe it has maybe he's trying to show that it has more to the power isn't in him, so he doesn't have to interact directly with him to be healed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. He's pointing somewhere beside. He says that he may know that there's a prophet in Israel, but the fact that there's a prophet in Israel means there's a real God in Israel, right? The prophet only stands in the place of, he represents God to the people. And so, yeah, there's something, this power is going to come from some other place than just this person, all right? And Naaman clearly expects a big magic display or fireworks or something, right? I thought he was going to come out and say some words and wave his hand and then it would be all better, right? And that's not what Elisha does, okay? And so there's definitely something being communicated about where the healing is going to come from, all right? Does this make you think of anything Jesus does, by the way? Elisha's actions? Do any of Jesus' miracles come to mind? Hey, Asa, what's going on, man? So think about there's a couple that come to mind. So the man who is born blind, right? Jesus puts mud on his eyes and then he sends him away, right? He says, "Go wash." Okay. So Jesus does something, but the miracle kind of takes place away from Jesus, right? He sends him away to go do that. All right. And Jesus asks questions to people like, "Do you want to be made well?" Right? What is Jesus trying to get at when he's doing that? What is it that he says makes people well? Any thoughts?
I don't know if this is right, but maybe he's like telling them to have more faith in him. He's telling the guy like he doesn't have to see Jesus to have faith in him. He should be able to have faith in him just because of the miracle that he can make.
Yeah, faith is exactly the right answer, Asa. There's a test of faith happening here, all right? Now, I know when Naaman walks away, he goes away in a storm of rage, and he doesn't have a ton of faith, right? He thinks this is ridiculous, But something in the way the servants speak to him gives him the ability to say, you know what, maybe this is possible. And it might just be a tiny little shred of faith. But remember, Jesus says that if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains, right? So that tiny little kernel of faith does something. He trusts that, you know what, this might be true. And he goes, he washes himself, and the Lord works this miracle of healing in his body, right? Faith is being tested here, right? Elisha is deliberately testing him, okay? Naaman misinterprets it as an insult at first. But because his personal expectations are so high that I'm this man of prestige, right? And the king turned me away, and now the prophet's turning me away. How dare they, right? That's kind of where he starts out. But gradually, as his servants help him think through this, they talk him off the ledge, and he's like, well, I just gotta try this. He's humbled to the point of faith, and all of a sudden there's this miracle of healing that takes place. Okay. So again, Naaman's, his response to Elisha, like, he's got such a high opinion of himself. There's this interesting balance of, there's a potential of him being really, really kind to his servants. Again, the evidence being that the servant girl is like wishing that he could be healed. And his servants address him as a father in verse 13. They call him my father, and they're able to entreat him without like fearing for their lives, which says something. But at the same time as he's kind, he's also very prideful. He's very full of himself. He's obsessed with his own self-importance, right? But again, the servants come to the rescue, and they attack their master's pride with common sense. Would you not just try something as simple as washing yourself in the river because the prophet said that? Maybe it'll do something. Okay. And I don't know if you've ever had that kind of occasion where somebody's had to like talk you down from the ledge of your pride, if you will. Just do it. Okay. Right. And see what happens. Okay. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but like, that's really, really a huge step to humble yourself when you're that high on your horse, that how dare this person say that to me? How could I ever possibly want to do what they suggest me to do? But if I humble myself and try it, man, like there's a big transformation step there, right? So that's a big deal, okay? What do you guys think about us? So let's kind of think about ourselves in this, because we're running out of time here. If we are in the position of Naaman, all right, where we have a huge sense of our self-importance, I deserve X, Y, or Z. I want X, Y, or Z. I had all these plans laid out, and I deserve them to all be fulfilled, right? How would clinging to that kind of sense of ourselves damage our potential to have a good relationship with God and to have a good relationship with other people? Where do you guys see the damage of that kind of pride taking the most effect? How would that impact our relationships? Any thoughts? How would pride damage our relationships?
I guess not at all.
Not at all. Is we can be the most prideful people we want, and it's not going to ruin any relationship ever. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, a relationship, it's no matter what it is, it could be teacher to student or father to son. It doesn't have to be a romantic one, but you still need time to invest in the other person. And if you're prideful, you want that time for yourself. You want to keep your pride. You don't want to lower yourself to their level, metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
Hang out with them, spend time with them. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. The nature of a relationship is that if it's going to be a healthy one, again, it doesn't have to, by relationship, I don't mean, boyfriend, girlfriend. I mean, any human interaction we have that's a friendship, or a relationship, we have to serve in some capacity. We have to care about their needs and not just our own wants and expectations, right? Otherwise it's not healthy. Otherwise it's all about me. Okay. So that's a big deal. Pride is a huge factor in that. If you feel like you have no quality friendships, you guys, maybe you want to evaluate, well, do I just treat other people like they exist to meet my needs? Do I just expect people to laugh at my jokes and make me feel good and change their schedules to meet my schedules? All right. Maybe it's not a pride issue. Maybe it's just genuinely that other people are busy or whatever, but like pride plays a big role in whether or not people want to connect with us. Any other ways pride might damage our capacity to have relationship? How about with God? Let's think about specifically a relationship with the Lord. How does pride negatively impact that kind of relationship?
I think it can impact both ways, is in the fact that you're at the point where you care too much about yourself and care what you look like, that you're not seeing how you're glorifying God. You just want to see how you are in front of other people and you want to fit in, but you should be trying to show God instead of yourself.
Yeah. Pride means that I got to be the top dog. That means that I got to get the glory, right? And maybe I don't think in those terms, like I'm not thinking in my head, how can I be more glorified than the Lord today, right? That's not usually the way I'm thinking about it. But because I'm just wired, in my sinfulness to elevate me over other people and over other things, I'm going to put myself on the throne of my heart and displace the Lord from the throne of my heart if I'm a prideful person. And guys, at the core of all this is simply that you and I are needy, right? We have a sin struggle that is ongoing. We need the Lord's help in that, and we want to glorify him through it, not just our own strength to overcome our challenges, right? Pride wants to keep us at the top. Our own self-worth and expectations want to keep us in a place that is much higher than it should be. And the Lord is the one who's to occupy the highest point in our life, all right? How does that relate to disappointment and experiences, right? I think that disappointment most often reveals that we have either these inflated expectations of, what we want out of life, or we have this inflated sense of pride, our own self-worth. And this, by the way, is not, to tell anybody you are worth less than you think you are. That's not what I'm saying, right? Rather, when we inflate our sense of worth, there's two ways we do this. One, we either think I am so awesome that everybody should love me, right? Or I think I am so awful that my problems are too unique and more unique than everybody else's, right? And nobody could possibly help me in my problems. Those are two sort of opposite extremes. You could call it self-pity and pride, or any other word you want to use, or a lack of self-confidence or something. But they're two sides of the same coin of this idea that I am something bigger, more significant than I am, right? And what we want to do is, Romans 12:3 tells us that we should think of ourselves, not more highly of ourselves than we ought to think, but consider ourselves with sober judgment. That's what Paul tells us to do in Romans 12:3. We need to see ourselves the way God sees us. Okay. And that's a big factor in whether or not we're going to be disappointed with our plans and with our expectations for life. And again, that sense of entitlement plays right into that. If we have this inflated view of ourselves, then we have these higher expectations of what other people should give to us or what we deserve out of life. And so I think we just want to evaluate, what are our unrealistic or misplaced hopes? What are the things that we have placed as idols in our life that we want to see achieved no matter what? And maybe God is saying, no, I'm taking you down a different route, because your plans are going to lead to more and more idolatry, but my plans are going to show you how much you need me, right? And maybe that's a role that disappointment might play in your life. Entitlement is the other side. Again, thinking that we deserve certain things, struggling to think more highly of ourselves than we ought. Luke in his gospel shares the account of, the two guys that are praying on the street. There's the one guy who's the tax collector and the one guy who's a Pharisee. And the Pharisee's like, Lord, I'm so thankful that I am not like the tax collector. Lord, you have made me so holy and so righteous, right? And that's kind of the way he's praying. And it's, this sort of hyperbolic, picture there, but you get the idea. And then meanwhile, the tax collector is just praying, Lord, have mercy on me, for I'm a sinner. And Jesus says, one of these two men was heard today. Right? One of these two men was heard. We don't want to be like the Pharisee who is pompous and sensing like, oh, I am righteous and I am good and I am worth all that and more. We don't want to be in that kind of a position. We want to see ourselves clearly in the way that the Lord sees us. Does that make sense to you guys? You guys tracking with me on that? All right. Disappointment is a big outcome of either viewing myself too highly or feeling entitled to the things that I see in life as belonging to me. All right. And ultimately, this exposes our illusion of control. Look how the story doesn't end in verse 15, but let's just read verse 15 to kind of get an end cap here. So after he's restored of his leprosy, it says verse 15, he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. All right. So again, the prophet had said, Elisha said he'll know that there's a prophet in Israel, but Naaman puts two and two together, right? Clearly, there is a God in Israel who this prophet represents. All right. He is the God, right? He's the one who's going to be worshipped here. There's some sad consequences for the rest of the story for one of his servants. Okay. But as far as Naaman is concerned, he gets this picture now. All of a sudden, he understands it. Here's what I want to do. I want to give you guys a little assignment here. So if you have a piece of paper or something you can write on, grab that. And I want to give you something to work on. You don't have to necessarily fill it all out now, but I want you to work on it in your own time. So grab something to write on. You probably can do this on your phone if you want, but it might be easier just to grab a piece of paper so you have the freedom, because you're going to need to write something in 3 columns. Okay. So we're talking about disappointment, expectations. I know we're a couple minutes over here. We'll wrap up quickly here. I apologize. We're going to talk about disappointments, how to deal with when life doesn't meet our expectations. Okay. And again, I think this is, I actually didn't, I had planned on talking about this before we even entered into quarantine. And it's just so apropos that this is what we are discussing today. But when life doesn't meet our expectations, it's easy to let our emotions over that wreck our perspective. Okay. Again, it is not wrong to feel disappointed when our plans don't work out. Totally human, totally natural, totally okay. It's when our emotions are like, I don't even know how to handle this, right? That's all of a sudden where we start to trend out of that realm of sort of a natural, expected disappointment and into, well, maybe this is revealing something of an idol in my life. I need to address this. All right. So, and we need to think about how we're going to handle those kinds of emotions, those kinds of responses, because unless, the Lord magically does something to provide a vaccine for coronavirus, right, we're still going to be dealing with this for some time. Okay. So the gap between our expectations and our experiences can often be difficult to navigate. So what I want you to do is draw 3 columns. So give yourself 3 good columns to write in there. Okay. 3 columns, single piece of paper. No rocket science here, okay? Just three little lines, all right? In that left column, on the left side of your page, I want you to write down the things that you expected this year to be like, all right? So that could be anything from school, work, family, travel, relationships, future planning, things that you expected 2020 to see happen, all right? You can be as detailed or as general as you want, but this is for your own edification. So the more detailed you can be, the better. All right. Anything that you expected this year to be like in different areas: school, work, family, travel, relationships, future planning, or fill in your own. Okay. And then in the middle column, all right, you can kind of do this again on your own time and kind of think about this on your own. In the middle column, you're going to write out for each of those things what it is that you actually experienced instead. Right? So let's say you had a travel plan like Tara and I did, okay? And that's not happening. So here's what we experienced instead of that travel plan, right? Some of it might have some crossover in your different categories. But write down the expectation in column 1 and then what you actually experienced in column 3. And it's sort of intended to look a little bit like a math problem. This plus this equals what? All right. So on the far right column, I want you to write what you can see God doing and teaching you through that particular experience. All right. And here's the thing. For a lot of you, if you're really honest with yourselves as you're working those first 2 columns, column 3 might look really blank because you don't know the answer to that yet. And part of what this exercise is intended to demonstrate is that that's okay. All right. We have to just measure that disproportionate sense of disappointment between what I expected and what happened. And now I have to start to understand, well, what is God trying to do with that? All right. So some of the answers to what I do with that are, maybe answers that aren't going to come for another month, 2 months, 3 months, a year, right? As I start to look back and see myself again more properly through the lens of how God views me, maybe I start to get a better idea of, well, here's what God was trying to teach me. Here's what God was trying to protect me from. Here's something better that God was trying to lead me to. And it's only now that I look at that disappointment in a little bit of a different light that I can see that. All right. So again, if that column, that third column is a little bit blank, that's okay. It's a matter of growing and praying through these experiences to help us see what God is doing a little more clearly. Does that make sense to you guys? Any questions on how that works? So what I'll do is I'm going to give that to you guys to work on. Keep that in like your Bible or something. Pray about it, think through it, and let's try to touch base on that a little bit next week as we start Bible study. We'll kind of start with this, and then we'll dive into another topic. But here's what I would encourage you. Okay, the story of Naaman and the servant girl and Elisha is a powerful story because it shows us, one, that God is powerful over even physical illnesses. Okay, which is something that is really good news to us today. All right, we don't know how God is going to work through coronavirus, but he is working in some way. Number two, we see God's love for people of all nations, of all tribes, right? That means he loves us because we're not Jews, okay? Anybody Jewish in this? I don't think so, okay? Right? So no special privileges, right? God loves anyone who places their faith in him and works in their hearts and their lives. Number three, not all of our expectations are going to be fulfilled the way we intended. Now, Naaman gets his wish, right? He's able to be healed. Guys, there's nothing in here about the servant girl being released, right? There's nothing about the servant girl being able to go back to her family if they're even still alive, okay? And so where we live is somewhere in between the two, okay? We have expectations, and we can probably all think back to ways that God has been faithful and answered prayers in some incredible ways. But we also probably have things that we're still waiting on, right? Things that we're still hoping that God is going to do, things that we're still trying to figure out, well, why is God doing that? All right, so we live in the in-between of these, the servant girl and Naaman, at least in their experience of expectation and disappointment. And that's okay. That's where we all live, in the tension of this sinful world. Where our hopes and dreams are ultimately in the eternity that we will spend with Christ for one day in the future, and what we experience right now. So our challenge is to see ourselves clearly in that. What is it that God has given to us? Who are we in Christ? And how is he going to play these things out into the future to glorify himself and bring about our best good as a result of that?